Hello, and welcome, intrepid listener. I'm your host, Devin C. Larson, voice actor and owner-operator of Killer Voice Studios, currently recording this podcast from my bedroom. And you're listening to the very first episode of what is sure to be, with your help, a hit podcast, a little thing I like to call Space Mummies from Planet X. I have no idea when you're going to be listening to this, but whether you're with me from the jump or diving back into the archive from some point in the distant future, just know one thing. I appreciate you. Yes, you. For if there's no audience to listen, does a podcast truly exist? I think Confucius said that, or something. So, what even is this thing? Space Mummies from Planet X is an exploration of all things sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. Every other week we'll take a deep dive into a subject or topic and examine its history, its themes, connections to other works, all that good stuff. And generally speaking, it'll be a celebration too, because who wants to waste time shitting on something subpar when there's so much out there that rules? Although that can be fun on occasion, so no promises. A podcast of contradictions, I suppose. Now, full disclosure, this is my first one of these hosting a podcast, just one host, one mic, Mark Maron style. It might be a little rocky. Stick with it. We'll grow into this format together, or at least until I get a guest or like a co-host at some point. I mentioned I'm recording this in my bedroom. I do have a booth that I do my professional work from. It's a converted closet, and it tends to get pretty hot in there. So for a change, I wanted to do something in a place where it was at least a little bit more comfortable. But the downside of that is we might have some audio issues. You might hear a plane or two fly by. We'll work it out. We'll workshop it over the course of, the next few episodes. We'll get into a rhythm. So, for our inaugural episode, I wanted to take a look at something that's extremely current at the time of this recording. In fact, I just saw it earlier today, and I wanted to talk about it. It's the latest film from director Jordan Peele, the sci-fi horror film, Nope.
What's a bad miracle? They got a word for that.
Now, we'll get to Nope in a second. I'm going to try my very best not to, get into the plot too much. I'll sort of talk around it because it's very new, and you really should go see it. But I kind of wanted to work up to it by talking about first Peele's background, and then some of his other works and exploring the themes and that sort of thing. So first, a little background on Jordan Peele. Jordan Haworth Peele was born February 21st, 1979 in New York, was raised in Manhattan's Upper West Side, and from an early age seemed to be interested in performing in movies. He graduated high school in 1997 and enrolled at Sarah Lawrence College for, wait for it, puppetry. Yeah. He told a Time magazine reporter in 2018 that he was obsessed with puppets and felt that puppetry was something he didn't feel he could fail at. And that lasted about as long as his first class on comedy, when he got bit by the comedy bug, and then first joined a comedy troupe and left school to pursue comedy full-time, and the rest was history. He formed an act with classmate Rebecca Drysdale called Two White Guys, and then became a member of the improv theater Boom Chicago out of Amsterdam, and regularly performed at Second City Chicago. Now, it was during a comedy swap with Second City in 2002 that Peele met frequent collaborator Keegan-Michael Key. The following year, in 2003, the two became regulars on the sketch show Mad TV. Peele remained on that show for 5 seasons through 2008. Later, in 2012, the two performers reunited to create and star in a little sketch show you might have heard of called Key and Peele, which ran through 2015 for 5 seasons. It was hugely popular, won a Peabody Award in 2013 for its satire and commentary on race, and in the final season, an Emmy. Now, I'm a big fan of Peele's comedy, specifically in Key and Peele, which was where I first encountered him. I feel that all the accolades that it received were more than well-deserved, as the show probed the absurdity of what African Americans experience navigating everyday life. It wasn't a show that was trying to be preachy, it just used that subject matter as a starting point and did what every great sketch show does. It heightened contradictions to the absolute limit of absurdity as hilarity ensues. Now, I feel at this point I should insert a disclaimer. I am very white. I am maybe not the best person to talk about Jordan Peele's commentary and use of race in his works, but I'm still a fan, and I'm what you got, so I'm going to do my best. But I wanted to throw that out there. Like, I'm maybe an imperfect spokesperson for all of this. That said, I can't speak highly enough of his comedy. So funny. Key and Peele, I remember, there's just so many sketch bits that were instant classics. I'm thinking of they had one where they were talking about just how bizarre the names were for NFL players when they were introduced. They had, Peele's impression of Obama and Key's anger translator. It was something different. It evoked in some ways Dave Chappelle, the Chappelle Show, but I think it went beyond. Like, it was just really clever, really funny. Now, in 2014, before the end of their sketch show, the two appeared in the FX show Fargo as a pair of FBI agents. Then, in 2016, Peele co-wrote the film Keanu and reunited, take a drink if you're playing along at home, alongside Keegan-Michael Key as a pair of cousins trying to retrieve a stolen kitten from a drug kingpin. Now, this one I haven't seen. Everything I've read is pretty positive, got decent reviews. This all brings us to the first of his films that I want to discuss, Get Out. This film came out in 2017. Peele wrote and directed it and ended up winning an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. It stars Daniel Kaluuya as a black man meeting the family of his white girlfriend for the first time and experiencing horrifying racism. Other actors in the cast include Allison Williams, Bradley Whitford, Caleb Landry Jones, Stephen Root, Catherine Keener. It's an all-star cast. Now, I assume that you've seen this movie. If you haven't, stop the podcast and go do that. I'm going to just kind of touch on a couple of the general plot points without trying to spoil it too much, but I kind of have to go through it in order to talk about the themes later. So, briefly, Kaluuya plays Chris, who's accompanying his girlfriend Rose, played by Allison Williams, and they're going back to Rose's family estate, where there's going to be a gathering, and he's only one of a couple of black people present. The others are basically a groundskeeper and a live-in maid. And during the course of that couple of days, there's a large family gathering of affluent, white, ostensibly liberal friends of the family. And Chris is kind of isolated, and there's all these weird comments and suggestions made about his physicality. And then he has a smoking problem, and the mother is a hypnotherapist and kind of almost against his will puts him under hypnosis. And anyway, the entire thing turns out to be a auction where they sell off Chris to one of the guests, and this is something that they've been doing for a long time, and they have a procedure that they perfected where they can transplant the brain of somebody, a wealthy white person, and put it into the body of whatever African-American person that they've lured there. And Chris gets caught up in it, ends up outwitting them, escaping while kind of taking justifiable revenge on the family, and ends up getting away. So that's like the plot basically. It's clear that as far as themes go, there's a constant strain of just like fetishization of black bodies and athleticism. There's just at the gathering, as I said, there's a number of people that are just making odd comments about just kind of like, oh, you look very fit, and just kind of, oh, black is in fashion, and just tell us about the black experience in America. Like, what's that like? And just really uncomfortable things. His girlfriend's brother is just acts like very like aggressive and dominating towards him. And there's no real thought or consideration given to like Chris as a person. He's treated as an object, like something to be literally bought and sold. Another theme is clearly alienation. From the second he gets there, he's just alone and surrounded by white people and just othered. And the movie goes into like how alienating, for lack of any other word, that experience is for a black person to be like the only black person in a group of white people. It's also seems to me that it's really taking a look at a certain strain of liberal, and to be clear, not all liberals are like this, but a certain strain that superficially tries to co-opt the struggle and identity of African Americans, but their whole thing is it's not undergirded by like respect, but just racism. There's also, I think, a element of how you have to trust your instincts, even when your rational mind is in control and telling you like, oh, it's fine. If you got like this little voice in the back of your head that's screaming like, run, something's not right here. You have to listen to it. I feel that's what the movie's saying. Now, it's a horror movie, so clearly there's like a fear of death throughout. That's pretty normal. But in this one, it's also kind of like a fear of decline that the affluent feel. I mean, we all feel it, but just the way that the affluent, the lengths they'll go to stave decline off. And he's talking at the party, speaks to like a former pro golfer who's just kind of wistfully like, oh, if I was like younger and I had like your physique, like I'd still be out there killing it on the, golf course. And everybody just sort of desires Chris's vitality. Like, a couple of the women seem kind of like aroused by the idea of Chris, just like touching him, feeling his muscles. As I said, the girlfriend's brother acts like really dominating aggressively towards Chris, clearly feels threatened by that same physicality. The only person that appears to be like interested in Chris the person is this blind art dealer who Chris has a conversation with. Chris is a photographer, but it ends up like that's the guy that wins the winning bid on Chris, and all he's interested in is Chris's vision, his eyes, and his ability behind the camera. That's all. There's also this element of black people being treated like animals, being hunted. There's this motif of this of deer. When they're in the car earlier on in the movie, Chris and Rose like strike a deer that just darts out into the middle of the road, and later on when Chris is trapped in a basement, there's like a deer head mounted on the wall just like opposite him. I'm thinking even down to like when he's escaping at the end, when the artifice of the whole thing is just completely dropped by the family and his girlfriend, who it turns out to be in on it. She's just hunting him down with like a hunting rifle. And then also with the deer being struck and left to die by the side of the road, it mirrors Chris's mother's death, which we find out she also was hit and by a hit and run driver and left to die by the side of the road. So there's these parallels there. There's also this moment earlier on where after they hit the deer, there's this kind of like really uncomfortable, tense moment with a white cop that shows up that wants to see Chris's ID, even though he wasn't involved and wasn't driving. And this is kind of like echoed again later in the film, like at the very end when Chris is like bloodied and he's like managed to get out of the house, and a car pulls up with flashing lights, and you're immediately thinking, oh God, like he's screwed, like here it goes. And out steps his TSA friend, Rod, I think, and it's just like the worlds of difference when you're dealing with somebody that like respects you as a person and shares some kind of like common experience. It's a disturbing and uncomfortable film. It feels so insightful into, as I said, the hollowness behind how affluent white people attempt to relate to black people at times. Clearly well received. In addition to winning Best Original Screenplay, it was nominated for Best Picture, and Peele was nominated for Best Director, which, for the sake of trivia, he's the third person ever to be nominated for those three categories in their debut film, after Warren Beatty and James L. Brooks. I checked, 98% still on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, damn, like you can't beat that. So following the release of his film and all the accolades in 2018, Peele announced his intention to retire from acting. He said that acting for him is nowhere near as fun as directing. He then co-created the comedy series The Last OG in 2018, starring Tracy Morgan and Tiffany Haddish, which is about an ex-con that returns to his old neighborhood after serving 15 years only to find everything has changed. Again, the alienation. He also wrote the YouTube premium comedy series Weird City in 2019. I'm not familiar with either of those, really. Also in 2019, though, importantly, his second film releases, Us. It starred Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke as the heads of a middle-class family under attack by their doppelgangers. Also stars Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker. Again, it's not my intention to like spoil this movie, but like I'm gonna kind of like sketch out the details of the plot a little bit so that we can then examine some of the themes. So again, if you're interested in seeing Us and haven't, I recommend you stop the podcast, go do that, come back. So I'll try to be as light a touch with spoilers as I can, but I mean, they're unavoidable in the way that I've structured this. So movies about a woman, Adelaide Wilson, who as a young girl went to the Santa Cruz boardwalk and ended up getting lost in a house of mirrors and running into her double. Years later, as an adult, she and her husband, Gabe, accompanied by their two children, are visiting her parents' cabin when they return to the same beach boardwalk from her childhood, and it dredges up a whole bunch of negative memories. Adelaide tells her husband, Gabe, about her experience as a child, and then their son, Jason, interrupts them to tell them another family is standing in the driveway. The husband unsuccessfully tries to get them to leave, and then the entire family is basically taken hostage by what turn out to be their exact doubles. Adelaide's double, Red, is the only one that can speak, and she tells a story about herself and Adelaide and how the government somehow like created doubles of people in order to control them, and those doubles live underground in just tunnels and abandoned subway systems and so forth, just throughout the entire country, the entire U.S., U.S., I think that's pretty intentional. And basically how there's just like one soul kind of split between the two sides of people, and how the people on the above ground, they're tethered to the people living underground, and those people, they're living an ugly parallel existence, And on this night, they've all come above ground to kill and replace their counterparts in an event they call the untethering. So the Wilsons manage to escape, kill their doppelgangers one by one, which their family friends, the Tylers, which is Elizabeth Moss and Tim Heidecker and their two girls, they're unable to do. They're immediately killed. The tethered are doing that to everyone all over the country, and eventually stand hand in hand to form a Hands Across America human chain from coast to coast. There's a confrontation between Adelaide and Red underground, where Adelaide kills her double, and then at the very end, super spoilers, there's a twist. We find out that the Adelaide that we're familiar with was in fact the doppelganger that switched places with her as a child back in 1986. So a lot going on. This one pretty clearly explores like class and inequality. I think there's an element of this kind of like fear and envy we have for our neighbors. Gabe and Tim Heidecker's character, whose name escapes me, they have this kind of like one-upsmanship rivalry. Like they're all very well-off, kind of bougie, and Gabe is like trying to kind of keep up with the Joneses, like gets a boat and all this stuff. And I think the doppelgangers, like, they look like us because they are us. We just disregard them and don't recognize them. And it's pretty clearly a commentary on the economically disadvantaged, the unhoused that populate the country, and we're connected to them in a way that we just refuse to recognize, and in this metaphor literally walk on top of, because they live underground. And I wonder if, like, maybe the significance of the doppelgangers in a sense is they're supposed to remind us of that would be us if we were to fall into poverty. And maybe it's what scares us and keeps pushing us to earn and having all these pointless luxuries, right? I think the Hands Across America thing, it's like a callback to like a commercial that Adelaide saw when she was a child at the very beginning of the movie. And I think the plan is to make a statement of like unity across the country, and just also just be proud and above ground and in the sun, open in the sunlight. And yeah, so I mean, it's a intense movie, shot very well. All his films have beautiful cinematography. Clearly has a lot of messages that it's attempting to explore in very metaphoric terms. This one for me, so the explanation about where the doppelgangers come from stretches my suspension of disbelief to the breaking point. Like, I know the explanation isn't necessarily like the part that you're supposed to focus on, but stuff like that, for me, it has to be consistent within the world of the movie, and just the kind of explanation of, oh, they're just our doubles created by the government for mind control. I don't know. Just feels like just a rough sketch of like an explanation, and it just, for me, it doesn't work. And not to be reductive, but this movie, outside of like sketching out the premise and like the setup at the beginning, it's just a lot of like murder and fear and running and just kind of like using your individual talents to survive, which, to be fair, most horror films fall into that category. Most horror films aren't trying to have a message, but that's one of the things that makes Jordan Peele's work more interesting, is that it has depth to it. There's a funny bit kind of like towards the middle end of the movie where the Wilsons are just inured to the violence of it all. Like, they've killed the doppelgangers of their family friends, and they're just like sitting watching TV next to their dead friends' bodies on the floor. It's played for comedy, but yeah, I mean, just it's not a bad movie. It's got a lot going for it. I appreciate it attempting to grapple with something kind of like larger to say about like how we treat people that, you know, if not for things being different, that would be us. But it feels like it's not as strong for me. Let me put it this way. It's not as strong for me as Get Out or Nope, which we'll talk about in a second. Apparently, I'm the outlier because film was critically praised. I checked, it has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. But that's us. So after that, Peele created and narrated the Twilight Zone reboot, 2019 to 2020 on CBS All Access. In 2020, he produced the HBO series Lovecraft Country, which I need to get back into. Like, I saw a few episodes. Really interesting. The Lovecraft mythos, which I'm sure we'll touch on in later episodes, is does not do African Americans justice. It's pretty racist. So kind of putting a twist on that and having like the protagonist be African American himself and kind of attempting to approach the mythos through that lens is interesting. In 2021, Peele co-wrote and produced Candyman, which was a spiritual sequel to the 1992 original. The movie suffered some delays and eventually released to positive reviews. Okay. So that's all leading us to the actual like subject of our discussion today, which is his latest film, Nope, which, as of this recording, just came out yesterday. This film stars Daniel Kaluuya again, returning to work with Peele. Also Keke Palmer, Stephen Yeun, and it has a really sweet cameo by Keith David. I'm going to talk way less about the plot than I did the other two films. I'm going to talk around like very specific plot points, and I'm really not going to give you much more than what you can get out of the trailer, like the very beginning of the movie, deliberately, because you should see it. It deserves to be seen in a theater. Okay, so roughly, the Kaluuya is O.J., Palmer is M. Haywood, brother and sister, and they're heirs to a horse training ranch for film and television and commercials. At the very beginning of the film, their father is killed by being struck by debris that rains out of the sky. The ranch has since fallen on hard financial times. OJ's been forced to sell off horses to the nearby Juniper's Claim Old West Carnival, which is run by Stephen Yeun playing Ricky Jupe Park. Jupe, we find out, was a child actor that witnessed something horrible as a child involving the exploitation of an animal gone wrong. Then odd phenomena start to occur around the ranch, and OJ discovers that there's a UFO in the skies. And together with his sister M, they set out to get clear photographic evidence of it, and then the fame and fortune that they imagine will come from that. That's about as much as I'm going to get into the plot, but it gives you a rough idea of like where it's starting. Now, this one seems to be... So we had the first movie focusing on just kind of like race specifically and how black people are fetishized and treated. The second film is about class. This one seems to be about exploitation, the legacy of people that work in Hollywood, and then family bonds. I think most specifically, it seems to be a commentary on Hollywood and how like getting the shot, be it a commercial or evidence of UFOs, completely trumps the well-being of people and or animals. That's where the exploitation comes in. It's just, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is getting what you need. It seems that economic depression is also kind of a recurring element, motivates the risk-taking behavior. The ranch falls into financial precarity. then that leads to the selling off of horses, then that leads to the OJ and M putting themselves in increasing physical harm's way by trying to lure out the UFO and get evidence of it. The movie very pointedly is also examining the exploitation of animals on film. The Haywood Ranch, the OJ who runs it, he clearly has like an ethical approach to how they care for their horses. It's just part of the legacy of that ranch. And whereas the Haywoods try to do it ethically, keeping the well-being of the animals in mind, Juniper's claim that that they sell their horses off to, more than happy to use them in less than humane ways. There's also this like freaky, unsettling subplot flashback to Stephen Yeun's character Jupe as a child, where he, as I said, he witnesses like this horrible event. And even like so eventually they tap like a director to come out and try to get the shot, and his whole thing and his free time is he's like editing footage of animals being like killed on film. And it's just this recurring thing about just like animal well-being is not taken seriously. And there's exploitation of people, including at one point, like there's this like TMZ biker that's just only interested in getting like information for TMZ. So like exploitation of people, exploitation of animals, just a recurring theme. And then just also the discounting of the legacy of black people in Hollywood. Like at the very outset of the movie, they're talking about how their great-great-great-grandfather was the first African-American on film riding a horse, and they just don't get credit for that. There's just no respect given to their family legacy. But what ends up mattering in the end is the bond between brother and sister, and that ends up allowing them to overcome the various dangers and plot twists that come later in the movie. So far, it has an excellent critical reception, 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that seems a little low for me. I mean, it's not... The movie is excellent. It's not as good as Get Out, but I think 82% seems low. So that's kind of all I can really get into at this point without just completely spoiling Nope for you, which I don't want to do. So that's kind of all I can get into. But you should see this movie in theaters. It's got gorgeous cinematography. Comparisons I was reading have been made to this being kind of Peele's like Spielberg turn, trying to kind of do a Close Encounters thing, which I can see that. And given Peele's track record, and I have to stress, I really did just glide through a good bit of it because he's very prolific. It's only a matter of time until he writes and directs and produces his next masterpiece, whatever that is. And wherever he goes from here, I have no doubt it's going to be worth the experience. And when that time comes, count on Space Mummies to be there, giving you the background, dissecting the themes, all of it. Because at the end of the day, I love this stuff, and I know you do too. So again, thank you. Thanks for listening to this first episode and supporting the show in whatever way you can. Rate and review it on iTunes, tell a friend. Tune in next time. And speaking of next time, since this is currently a one-person operation and I need time to research the topics and, make it good, I plan on putting out a new episode bi-weekly, or, in other words, every other week. Every other Tuesday, in fact. So, for the next episode in 2 weeks, I hope you'll join me for a discussion of the landmark cyberpunk manga and film, Akira. Neo Tokyo is about to explode. See you then.